Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another live. So today we're going to be discussing an interesting clip that I came across. Someone shared initially on the channel and then I watched earlier. And I thought it was a very interesting clip of Ricky Gervais being interviewed on the late night show where they discuss I think it's his Netflix series called Afterlife. And one of the key themes that came out of it, guys, which really I thought was a point of discussion, something that needs to be spoken about and something we need to get across, was the idea of suffering and making sense of suffering on atheism in particular, because the whole idea of his show, as he points out in the clip, by the way, the full video that I'm discussing here, or the points from which I'm taking and discussing here, is in the description of this particular video, inshallah. So you guys can go there and watch that clip there for yourselves. But the point that's brought up, or what's discussed in this sort of drama, is the idea of a man. He loses his wife due to cancer, and he's really broken by this. He has no reason to live, and he's an atheist. So he's trying to make sense of life. And I think that concept itself is very interesting, which is that how do we make sense of suffering? How do we make sense of life as a whole, firstly? And secondly, how do we make sense of suffering in particular? Because suffering is, it's an inevitable part of life. Every single one of us suffers. Every single one of us, whether religious or irreligious, Muslim or atheist, every single one of us has experienced some form of suffering in our lives, is experiencing it right now as we speak, or will be experiencing it in the very near future. It's an inseparable part of life. It's a reality, and it's something which we can't get rid of. It's always going to be there. And if it's always going to be there, and it's such a troubling part of our existence, then it's something that needs to be looked into, and it's something that needs to be discussed, and it's something that we need to explore and try to understand. Now, I give credit to Ricky Gervais for, engaging with this issue or this problem in his drama series. I know I've criticized him a lot in the past in regards to his views, and I still hold to those in regards to his views on atheism and his views against religion, which I think are misinformed and ill-informed, to be more accurate. However, I think this particular point is an interesting one and needs to be discussed. Now, obviously, he made blunders in this particular video too, and obviously the host of the show, whose name I can't remember right now, most atheists, when they speak to him, they seem to have a problem engaging with him. They seem to stutter and be all over the place when they engage with him. But nevertheless, this particular topic was very interesting. And so his thing was that, look, this character in his show, he doesn't want to live, he doesn't want to go on, but he thinks while he lives, he's going to make life miserable for everyone, and he's going to try to explore ideas and ways of keeping himself going as an atheist. Now, I want to pick up on this and sort of discuss this for a moment. What does, firstly, life mean on atheism? Something we've discussed in many videos before as well. And secondly, what does suffering mean on atheism? How do we make sense of suffering? First on atheism, then we look at it from an Islamic perspective. On atheism, or naturalism, or any view for that matter which denies a creator, a God, in particular a personal deity, a personal being, a personal creator, and therefore acknowledges or accepts or believes that life is one big accident, because that's the inevitable outcome of this type of view anyway, that there is no God, there is no creator. Therefore, everything that exists, including human life, is just one big accident. There is no meaning to it. We're just here and we're going to die. We've just accidentally appeared in this existence, and we will inevitably very soon die. And that's it. There is no meaning to our existence. There is no meaning to our lives, and therefore, by extension, there is no meaning to our suffering. Now, I want us to think about this. It's one thing to acknowledge that there is no meaning to our existence, okay? That's the logical outcome. It's existential nihilism, or nihilism, whichever way you want to say it. That's inevitable. But what's more interesting to me is that how this outcome or this result is problematic to us human beings, meaning that it doesn't sit well. We don't like this. It doesn't feel right. It's painful. right? Just the idea that life is meaningless. Let's put suffering aside for a second. Life is meaningless. It goes against our very nature as human beings. And I mean, if we were just accidents, if we were just biological accidents that just emerged into this existence and popped into this existence, well then why should understanding and acknowledging life is meaningless be problematic or painful? It shouldn't be the case, but it is. And our very nature screams out to us, no, there is meaning to life. It's interesting that we're meaning-driven creatures. We ascribe meaning to everything around us in the world, and we ascribe or try to look for meaning to our existence. And in the absence of meaning, when we recognize on atheism and naturalism that there is no meaning to life, what do? We try to plug the gap. We try to plug the hole. Okay, I'm going to make up meaning for myself, as did some of the existentialist philosophers. Let's make meaning up for ourselves. Let's live responsible lives. Or the more, if you like, the modern day response to this existential nihilism is, let's lose ourselves. Let's completely switch off. Escapism. We're either escaping through hedonism, just living for pleasure, or we're escaping through social media. I mean, the TikTok culture, the gaming culture, it's crazy. We're just completely switching off from reality and choosing to live through a game and give meaning to ourselves via the rules of the game, these games that we play. So much so that when we're told not to play these games, people end up committing suicide. I mean, that's the crazy world that we live in. I made a video a little while ago on PUBG, a game that was banned in certain parts of the world, and how the reason being because some people, when they were told not to play or prevented from playing the game, they actually took their own lives. And I know I'm not laughing about it, but it's absurd. It's crazy when you think about this, that technology is leading to our death in some ways. So, point being, on atheism and naturalism, there is no meaning to life, and therefore by extension there is no meaning to our suffering. And that's even more problematic because suffering in and of itself is one of those things. When we experience something difficult in our lives, when we go through a hardship, when we go through a trial, when we experience pain, when we lose someone dies, we lose, financially we're bankrupt. I don't know what it is. Whichever one of the forms, 101 different forms of suffering that suffering comes in. Whenever we experience suffering and pain, it's difficult. It's painful. It breaks us down, right? And we, as human beings, being creatures that are looking for meaning in the world around us and within our own existence, we look for meaning in this suffering too. It's inevitably we're going to do this. That's just the way we are designed. That's our makeup. That's how we're arranged to see the world. That's just who we are. We are meaning-driven creatures. But when we look for meaning in suffering on atheism and naturalism, there is no meaning. There is no meaning. And that is such I would say, and this is why I have such a huge problem with atheism or any ideology that denies a creator, because when you deny God, you deny yourself as a human being. You deny yourself. And this is why God in the Quran says, do not be like those who forgot Allah, forgot God, and God made them forget themselves. As soon as you turn away from your creator, you forget who you are, and you land yourself in a position where you can't even account for your humanity. I mean, really think about that for a second. By denying God, you're putting yourself in a position where you cannot even account for those things that make you human. You can't account for morality. You can't account for ethics. You can't account for the suffering that you're experiencing and make sense of it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you're left in a position where life hits you, you experience some sort of pain or tragedy in your life, and it just means nothing. I mean, put yourself in that position for a second. How would one feel in that position? And I feel sorry for people that end up in that position. But where they have deliberately decided to, and sometimes not deliberately, but accidentally or just by influence of others, decided to adopt a worldview and ideology, which is now put them in a position where they can't make sense of their suffering. I mean, suffering has no meaning on atheism and naturalism, as does the rest of your life. It's all meaningless. It's all pointless. Now, let me juxtapose that with the Islamic perspective. What does Islam say in regards to suffering? How does Islam inject meaning into suffering? What does God tell us, about suffering and why we suffer? Islam provides a very comprehensive answer to this and a multi-dimensional answer to this. Now, let me just touch upon a few key points in regards to how we make sense of suffering in Islam. Number one, Allah, God makes very clear to us that life and death were created to test which of us are best in deeds. Life is a test. It's not supposed to be paradise. We're not here to have fun. We're not here to live lives full of pleasure and just enjoy ourselves and then that's it. We die. No. Who told us this was the case? Why have we assumed this is the case? I mean, if we really stop and think about it, when something goes wrong, some of the atheists jump and say, oh, look, this is evil, this is bad, why is this happening? Why would God allow this to happen? Assuming one of the assumptions underlying all of this is, well, life should be amazing, life should be perfect, life should be beautiful. Well, why are we assuming this? Who told us this? God has told us very clearly that life is a test. You're going to suffer, you're going to go through hardships and trials and tribulations. Why? Because it's a test to see which of you is going to come out the best, which of you is going to handle those situations the best, engage with and deal with your trials and tribulations in the best way. Right? That's the first thing. Life is a test. Secondly, suffering, trials and tribulation give us an opportunity to come close to our Creator, to find our Creator, to connect with Him, to turn to Him, to develop our relationship with Him. It's sad, but it's the nature of human beings that most of the time when things are good, when we live in luxury and we have ease, seldom do we acknowledge our Creator. We become deluded and distracted. We become absolutely heedless and we lose ourselves in our pleasures, in the good of this world. And it's only when we suffer and when we go through hardships and trials and tribulations, at least most of the time, that's when we wake up and realize our fallibility as human beings and realize how really dependent we are upon our Creator. And it's in those moments that we turn back to God and connect with Him. So the one way of looking at suffering from an Islamic perspective is that it's an opportunity for us, that God is presenting us for us to turn back to our Creator. And what's very interesting here, brothers, sisters, and friends, is that what does turning back to God mean and connecting with Him mean? It's essentially fulfilling the purpose of our existence, because God says in the Quran that He did not create us for any other reason except to know Him and to worship Him. The purpose of our existence fundamentally is to worship our Creator, have a relationship with Him. And therefore, if it means that it's going to be suffering that occurs in our lives which leads us to that relationship and leads us to fulfilling the purpose of our lives, then that suffering, on the surface, that thing which seems evil and bad, actually is what's good. It's what's actually good. See, from an Islamic perspective, good isn't what leads to pleasure necessarily. No. Good is what leads us to help, or what helps us in fulfilling the purpose of our lives, which is to worship our Creator. So therefore, if you suffer, and that suffering leads you to your Creator, God opens a window of opportunity for you to turn back to your Creator, then that suffering is good. That's how profound this is. So that suffering is a blessing. Although on the surface it's something difficult and painful and something we may not be able to make sense of, but if it leads you back to God, that is something beautiful. Although obviously we don't wish for suffering, and we pray to God that He makes us individuals that actually, it's the good things that come to us in our lives, those good things turn us to God so we don't have to suffer as much. But if suffering leads you to your Creator, it's actually a beautiful thing. A third point I want us to consider, suffering develops us. We grow through trials and tribulations and suffering. Again, it's just human nature. That's how we develop as human beings. I mean, it's like anything else in life. We have amazing metaphors that we can reflect upon. When where are diamonds found? How are diamonds formed? Think about it. Think about how do you forge metal? Imagine the old swords when they would forge those swords. How would you forge them? They would have to experience or go through intense heat and pressure for you to have a sword which was strong and tough. Think about a modern day example. Exercise. How do you build muscle? It's by putting yourself through resistance. That pain, each time you go to the gym and you scream and you experience that pain, that's what leads to growth. These are perfect metaphor for us to reflect upon. It's the same with life. When we go through trials and tribulations, we grow and we develop, and our lives are testament to this. I mean, think about it. Reflect upon the suffering that you've gone through in your life, the hardships and trials you've gone through in your life. And when you've come out on the other side, haven't you come out a better person? If you've allowed for that suffering to develop you. See, there is an element of where your free will comes into play here, where you have to choose your reaction to that suffering. This is a very important point. You have to choose your reaction to the suffering. When you're going through a hardship or a trial, are you going to sit there and complain and moan and cry and just throw your hands up and blame God? Because if you do this, you're still going to suffer, but you're not going to gain anything from that suffering. Or are you going to remind yourself that this is a part of life? God has told me I'll be tested, and this is a part of my test. But God has also told me that when I go through this, I have to act in a certain way. I have to do what's best. God has also told me to practice patience, because patience is a trait of those who are successful, as we find in Surah Al-Asr, the chapter which is called time. So instead of crying and moaning about it, am I gonna be patient, and I'm gonna by acting upon and embodying patience in my being and being patient, am I gonna allow myself to have that clarity of mind to see what's in this suffering for me, the lessons that are there in the suffering for me, and therefore take those lessons and develop through it? This is another profound thing. I once heard someone say that in every trial and tribulation, there is a scholarship to be gained. And it was a very profound thing, and it stuck with me till this day. I think it was during I don't remember exactly where it was, but nevertheless, what's important is what was said. The brother said that through every trial and tribulation, there is a lesson, there is a scholarship to be gained. But for us to gain that scholarship, you have to have the right mindset in that suffering. You have to get hold of yourself. You have to get yourself together, and you have to remind yourself, this is a part of life. Allah is always there. God is always there to help me. Right? And what would He want me to do in this situation? To be patient and to remain steadfast and do whatever I can in my power to overcome this suffering, but at the same time be patient with it and to see if I can learn something from this. And when you come out on the other end, you come out a much better person, a person who's developed for yourself, that can help yourself better in the future, facing future trials and tribulations, but also help others. Think about it. Many examples in this life. Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm pretty sure that the person that came up with it was an ex-alcoholic. Those most psychologists and therapists these days are people who had psychological issues themselves in their lives when they overcame them, and then when they overcame them, they had this drive to go and help others and do help others that are in the same situation as they may have been in several years ago. So suffering is an opportunity for us to develop and to gain something from it. And these are just three perspectives. Suffering also from an Islamic perspective is an expiation of sins. It removes the sins that we commit. And therefore it removes the barriers between us and paradise, that which God has in store for us in the next life. Right? And so there are so many different perspectives and beautiful aspects to suffering from an Islamic perspective. And again, this is what I mean. Most people are not aware of how Islam comprehensively provides an account for life. If people were to start to understand this, so many people will come to Islam. They wouldn't even worry about the logical, rational arguments for the proofs of Islam. That's secondary. When they see the utility of Islam, what Islam has directly is going to positively impact your being and your life, when they see this, they will start coming to Islam. They will see the truth of Islam through this. But most people, unfortunately, don't get to that point because there are so many misconceptions in regards to Islam that are out there, and so many just distorted views that are being pushed and promoted. So I guess to summarize and just to conclude, so we don't go on too long and we keep this under 20 minutes. From the atheist perspective, suffering has no meaning. It's just suffering. It's just pain. It's just pain. And that's it. But from the Islamic perspective, suffering has a beautiful meaning. Suffering has a very profound place in our lives, which helps us to develop. It helps us to get closer to our Creator. It helps us to fulfill the purpose of our existence. It helps to expiate sins. It helps us to become better people, and much more. I haven't done justice to the idea or the philosophy of suffering from the Islamic perspective in this video, but at least hopefully I've given you something to think about and some food for thought. So brothers, sisters, the Muslims that are watching this, please share this with non-Muslims so they can hopefully benefit, because the reality is every single human being is suffering from something. And every single person that is suffering is looking for some sort of solace in something. They're looking for answers. So please share this video with them so they can benefit from this too. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because if you leave a like, as far as I'm aware, it will help in pushing this video out to more people. If you're a non-Muslim that watches this video and has come across this, at the very least, I really encourage you guys to look into Islam further and see, how it provides answers for your existence, your life, the problems you're going through. How it gives you, how it clarifies these things for you. So I leave you guys with this. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I know you guys have been leaving live comments. I'm not going to be able to address them right now, but please, if there's something that's important that you need to ask, you need to mention, please put it in the comment section of this video. Till next time, take care.